All right. You are listening to ManAlive, and today is day 2 of G3, and James is going to share with us what his experience was today. So I'm just going to open up the floor to you, brother.
Well, thank you, David. It's day two, like you said. Had a great time. The wear and tear from the travel and the first day definitely caught up, but enough energy drink didn't fix. I will jump right into it. They started off with James Coates. Are you familiar with James Coates at all?
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's one of the Canadians.
that's right. The Canadian preacher that got arrested, and I think this is his first year at G3. Pretty sure, at least as a speaker.
Conference.
The big Georgia conference.
Yeah.
He spoke on God's sovereignty over election, the election of his own. He stuck to Romans 9. So this was in a conference about sovereignty. Romans 9 is going to be somewhere, and he was the one that did Romans 9, specifically 6 through 13, discussing the election of individuals. Jacob I have loved, but Esau I hated, along those lines. Um, Probably the big picture I took from him, and I'm still considering the argument. The words for knowledge. He took it and said that people who don't believe in election or want to have a weaker election, maybe that's not the fair word to use, a lighter version of election than 5 Point Calvinists would use. Maybe that would be a way to put it. They like to say foreknew means that God looked down the corridors of time. Right.
I'm tired of that argument too. To be honest with you, and I know me and you disagree on
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
and maybe it's because I'm tired, but that's a strong man argument, and it peeves me to be as clean about it as possible. It peeves me off because it's a straw man argument. It just is. Not everybody who's not a 5 Point Calvinist is Arminian and believe that it's foreknew as if God had to look down some alleyway of timelines to decide who he was electing. That's a garbage argument used by Calvinists, and I love Calvinists, but it's a garbage argument. Have you ever heard me say that foreknowledge meant that he had to look down a corridor of time?
No, not to my knowledge.
Exactly. And there again, there are those out there who use that, right? And I'm not saying that
Right.
they're not out there, but there are a ton of people who are more I tell you who a group they disagree with, but they don't beat up on soteriology wise. Lutherans.
I'm not well versed in Lutheran doctrine, actually, so you might have to go a little bit deeper into that if you want to.
Well, okay, so Lutherans it's single predestination. Me and you've talked about this before versus double predestination. I lean more towards a Lutheran view in that particular area. Now, there's other things about Lutheran theology that I disagree with uh, uh, Lutherans in the same way that I disagree with Presbyterians, and that's baptism. Their baptism is flawed, and it causes people to
Yeah.
sin. And so but I'm going to stop only because of time, and I don't want to keep us out all night. But it does drive me to no end to hear. It's just like the Christian nationalism stuff when they go, well, they want a Christian pope. We've won that argument, haven't we? I mean, in my point of view, right?
Sure. So,
Prayers
so, so
that,
what the direction James Coate went with it was something I'd never heard before, though.
all right.
So James Coate, he says that you have some people who say that foreknowledge, it means those two words separate, right? God has
For
foreknowledge
you.
of people, right?
Yeah.
Um, or foreknowing means foreknowledge. Now he doesn't agree with that, but he's setting the stage, right? He says that there's people that believe that for God to foreknow people, it means he's got four. All it is he has foreknowledge of their actions.
Yeah.
Which goes back into what you were talking about. But the argument he made I'd never heard before was that if you believe that foreknowledge, and you may not like this, but I'm just going to tell you what his argument
Oh,
was,
I ain't.
and I've never heard it before, but that if that's what foreknowledge means,
Mm-hmm.
that God foreknew, God had, if I'm sorry, if foreknowing means that God just has foreknowledge of
Yes.
someone's actions, and Romans 8 follows the trail of whom he foreknew, he predestined to be called children of God, right? Romans 8, 29, I think. Well, God has knowledge already has foreknowledge of everybody's actions already. And so if foreknowing means foreknowledge, according to Romans 8:29, you get universalism. I've never heard that before.
As much as you've listened to James White, you've never heard that before?
Not that argument that you get universalism if you define foreknowing as just meaning foreknowledge of everybody's actions.
So
I've
that
never heard that before.
James White's that case.
I've never heard him. I'm maybe he has, but I've never heard it before.
I don't know if he focused so much on like the words for knowledge as much as he says that the implication of foreknowledge in that way leads to a universalism.
Right.
I've heard it,
But it was interesting. It was something interesting to me because it's new. So I do want to dig a little deeper into it in my own study and contemplate it. But that was one of the bigger comments that I remember from James Coates' sermon. I did like some of the quotes he had. No one is entitled to God's mercy. Now, I thought that was just a mighty strong quote, and it's true. God has freedom in mercy. Deuteronomy, right? I will have mercy on whom I mercy. I will, and so on and on. And election, however it's done, right, is to the praise of the glory of His grace. It's all for God. It's for God's glory.
Yeah.
And so pretty good sermon by him on Romans 9. I enjoyed it. Let's see, James White. So as far as learning new stuff, James Coates was the best today.
Okay.
But as far as emotional impact on me personally, between James White and Paul Washer, they both matched each other for that. And I was and especially James White, usually I learn the most from him. But he went through the trial of the false gods, Isaiah 40 through 48. Now, obviously, he didn't exegete Isaiah 40 through 48 in hour and a half long sermon. But he started in Isaiah 41 and went to verse 21 through 23. It's the verse that talks about the wicked man cuts down a tree, saws it in half, bakes bread with it, makes a fire with it, and when he's done with all that, takes what's left over and makes out of it and says, here's the one who's fed me and clothed me. Right? So God puts it on trial, and James White put a great picture, a great image in our heads of, so imagine that trial with the idol standing in the dock. He's just staring straight ahead, right? Idol's just staring straight ahead. Can't smile, can't frown, just staring straight ahead. And God goes, well, do evil, do good, terrify us, right? Do something. And the idol's just staring straight ahead. Yeah, it was a great mental image of what's going on here. And James White mostly focused on two things that God asked of the idol. Number one's obvious. Tell us of things to come. Prophesy. Tell us the future. Right? And he made the point that prophecy and God's sovereignty go hand in hand,
Okay.
right?
Mm.
But the other thing that he mentioned that
Let me clarify that too before if anybody goes how. Because God is sovereign, He doesn't predict; He tells you.
right, he makes it happen.
Yeah, He
He's
doesn't.
he's outside of time, so we have no words to describe,
Yeah,
right? We just know that through the Holy Spirit in the Old Testament, they predict things, right? Inspired by the Holy Spirit,
it's
and
not a
Jesus.
prediction because it's
Right. Well, you're right. It's a
it's
prophecy. You're right. Prophecy. It's more than a predict. It's a prediction doesn't fully describe it. It's more than a
yeah.
prediction. Prophecy's larger than that.
It's a
Where was I going
declaration
with
from
that?
God of what's exactly going to happen, and that's the reason I just for somebody listening who goes, "How is sovereignty connected to prophecy?" That's how.
Sure. Thank you. Good point. Thank you. But so the second thing, the second thing he says, tell us what's to come. Then he says, tell us former things.
Mm.
And this is what blew my mind. Tell us of the things that have happened in the past. And he brought up COVID,
Mm.
right? He brought up the the COVID-19, and I you have people now that are trying to tell you, no, the government didn't lock everybody in their homes
Yeah,
back in
yeah,
2020 and 2021. No, the government didn't do. Already 2 years down the road, trying to rewrite history,
already, yeah,
right? Excuse me. Let me take a sip of my swig of my tea here. And so, just think about things in history that we'll never know for certain, um, because of corruption and wickedness of men. And God knows everything that has ever happened,
yeah.
right? Right. I mean, it's right.
We
Sovereignty
look
of
at
God. He's
Genesis as an eyewitness account, not as myth.
exactly.
Yeah,
So he had a great application for this. So an idol it can't tell you what's going to happen, much less tell you what has happened
all right.
or why, what the reason is. He spun off of that to the application when he was a chaplain in a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And James White will tell you that that he has so much respect for any pastor that is a chaplain at a hospital or anything related to that, because there's always someone sick,
Yeah,
right? Your work is never done.
yeah,
And he would use these verses to comfort and console people. Um, there's meaning in suffering. There's meaning in pain. God knows all the former things that have happened, your emotions through it, those times that you felt like God abandoned you. God knows all of that.
yeah,
An idol does not know that.
yeah.
And there was so much more that could be said about that. But that when he started talking about times that you felt like God abandoned you, that touched my heart. And we stayed right there with that sermon all the way to the end. It was a beautiful sermon. He ended it by saying, idolatry is not a victimless crime.
Yeah.
Because at the end of that segment that he was preaching from, it says that whoever's bowing down to these idols, to these things that don't know the future and don't know the past,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't call them an abomination. It calls the people that bow down to those idols an abomination.
Yeah.
Idolatry is not a victimless crime. You, the idolater, are the victim. You're the sinner. You're the victim. You're hurting yourself. Stop it. That's basically what he said.
Yeah.
Great, powerful sermon. Anything you want to say about that? Any thoughts, or you want me to keep going?
No. We're at 14 minutes now, so
All right, let's keep going. Unfortunately, Vodi Bakum, I stepped out during his sermon to allow my wife to sit under it.
there's some good.
Our newborn was a little bit. Our newborn did. Well, I say newborn. He's 5 months old now.
Yeah.
He did great yesterday. Today he had a little bit more trouble. He was tired. He was fussy. So my wife had done a great job taking care of him up to this point. So at this point, I stepped out with him and let her journal and sit under Vodi Bakum, because it was on marriage and she loves Vodi Bakum. So
Mm-hmm.
she was really blessed by that. she's written down some notes, but it was overall it was talking about marriage and the family
Yeah.
and how you have this culture today.
He hit on his
Just
strong suits.
yes, Vodi Bakum, family, marriage, uh, godly manhood.
Yeah.
Those are Vodi. That's Vodi at his best,
Yeah.
and the reaction he got at the end of his sermon, as I walked in there at the end, he hit it out of the park.
He my hero.
I did, yeah, I did get to hear, as I was walking around some of the booths, I got to visit with the Reformed Sage.
Yeah.
Um, really cool guy. Really cool guy. Chatted with him a little bit on how he got started with his merchandising company.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a great story. Really faithful, friendly, super awesome guy to talk to. Before that, I got to meet Sam Waldron. Sam Waldron is pastoring Owensboro, Kentucky. Really cool guy.
Covenant Baptist Theological Seminary.
Yes, yes. I forget the name of his church, but it's in Owensboro, Kentucky.
Yeah.
He's got some really good sermons on Romans 11.
You didn't tell him you were
Israel.
post meal, did you?
He's Amil. Mainly, he's good to talk about Israel and the church and their relationship. He's really strong, got some really good doctrine on that, so I enjoyed listening to
I
him.
heard him hammer against the post meals one time, and I was like, "Oh,
No,
he's really
he's definitely not post meal, but um, yeah, he'll tell you that he came out of dispensational theology, and
yeah."
um, he's got good stuff on Romans 11. I highly recommend checking him
I
out.
do, listening to what you're talking about. I mean, because he's somebody I catch from time to time. I don't listen to a whole lot.
I found him through Alpha and Omega Ministries, James White. Um, James White said he had a really good sermon on Romans 11, and that's I was interested in hearing it, so I went and found him and listened to other stuff he had spoke about, and I like his opinion. I valued it.
Okay,
So now we get to Paul Washer.
you met
Paul
him?
Washer. I did not. I did not.
Okay.
I of all the people here, Paul Washer is the one that I would most like to meet and shake the hand of, but mostly because
He's the
when
one
I
out of
got
everybody there that would most like that not to happen.
he's a humble guy. He really does not when he does not want to be seen as the preacher. He wants to be seen as simply delivering the
Yeah.
words of God. Super humble guy.
See the wisdom of walking by him and just saying, "Hey, Mr. Paul," and keep on, or Pastor Paul, and keep on moving.
But when I first, I would say when I first got saved, right,
Yeah.
and started searching for some real solid preaching, right, and I didn't even know what was solid because I didn't know my Bible,
Yeah.
but the Lord, in His providence, sent a lot of sermons on YouTube my way of Him,
Yep. Yep.
and so I feel like I've grown up on my Christian walk with following Him,
Yeah.
listening to Him, and he'll probably never see this, but Paul Washer, you've made a difference in my life, and I thank you for your faithfulness.
I think the first thing I ever saw from him was a sermon a long time ago, before he ever did the whole "I'm talking about you" thing, right?
Yes, that wasn't even the first sermon I saw of him, but that was that was great.
And I can't tell you what the whole thing was about, but I remember this stuck out to me. Him talking about loving your wife, and that if y'all are on a boat and your kids are drowning and your wife is drowning, you better save your wife. And he got a lot of heat from that statement, but he's absolutely right. Talking about the love you're to have for your spouse over your children. I mean, it just phenomenal
Yeah.
sermon, and I'm not doing it justice by trying to just sum it up and give it.
I have to go after we get here. I want to send me the link because I would like to go listen to that.
Man, I don't even know if I can find it. But I'll try.
But Paul Washer, being the missionary he went to the end of Matthew, right? Matthew 28. He did 16 through 20, but he also backed up and gave some important context. And and I'll tell you why I appreciate that the youth sermon that he did, where he where that phrase became famous. I'm talking about you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I was in youth groups that was exactly like who he was referring to, and I would even say I was probably I was right there, part of them, right?
Okay.
But anyways,
I forget how much older than I am than you sometimes.
so I got a few quotes here. He started in Matthew 28, started in verse 8, and walked through, gave some context. He, one of his powerful statements that I took to heart. Um, he's had missionary people that were prospective missionaries wanting to come to him and say, "Hey, I want to go. I want to go serve. Just want to go serve the Lord in Peru or Africa or wherever." And he would say, well, how's your preaching, your street preaching, or your witnessing? Well, I'm not. I just don't have that gift, or I'm not comfortable with it. Just don't feel like doing it.
Mm,
But I just want to go serve the Lord. And he'll say, well, okay, how are you um on prayer, on strong prayer, on intercessory prayer? How are you with that? I just my prayer life needs a lot of work. He said that when he's had kids come up to him and tell him that he says, if you don't have the word or prayer, the people in these countries do not need you. They need God,
mm.
and you need more. You need more work. And that was just a powerful statement. He took that from the verse where um, the women find Jesus, and he tells them, "Go and tell the
Yep.
disciples." Right, and so it says that they ran.
Yep. Yep.
Right, they ran to the disciples. We are to take the word that God gives us, right, good theology, and run with it. And it was just a powerful moment. Did you think something funny?
Man, I just thought of Rick Warren using that passage for women pastors, and I'm just rolling my eyes, slammed to the back. I was looking at my brain. I rolled my eyes so hard.
I see that just disgusts me. Because if you take all four gospels and that moment when he's risen from the
Mm-hmm.
grave, you take all four gospels, get the full context of what's going on, right? It shouldn't even be it shouldn't even be something that should come up,
No.
right? It's describing some powerful events going on. Um, Peter and John believed, but Peter walked away doubting from the tomb. Um, Jesus used the women
Mm-hmm.
to tell the disciples, hey, he's alive, he's coming to you.
Mm.
He's coming to you. He's alive, he's coming to you. And like he used the women for good in that moment,
Yeah.
right? He didn't ordain them to preach. He used them as they faithfully clung to his feet, as Matthew says, that they reached for the feet of
Yeah.
Jesus.
Well, these people are just pushing for that demonic
Yeah.
egalitarian worldview.
Yeah.
And a lot of them will say that they're Christian, but that's what they're pushing for. That, and it is a demonic egalitarian worldview. That's why when you look at pictures, descriptions of demons, they all look homogenous. You know, you can't tell what they
And
Oh
androgynous,
yeah,
yeah,
my bad. Yeah,
yeah,
word.
androgynous. So the other big picture I got from Paul was how can one, and we've talked about this before, when you change your mind on something, or that's not a better way to put it is when so as unbelievers, right? The moment that we
Mm-hmm.
change, that something's been put into our hearts, the Spirit has done something to us, and we change. We believe something we did not believe before,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, you got these hard individuals who, um, they should be repenting, but they
Yeah.
don't. And he said, how can one believe if as wicked as we are, how can one come to faith? How can one believe? And he basically said, because it's true. The gospel is
Yeah.
true. The Bible is true. And the Holy Spirit works in
Yeah.
it
Well,
and will change hearts and
it's sharper
minds
than
to
any
believe
two-edged
it.
sword, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it divides spirit between spirit and
Yeah.
marrow.
What does that mean? It cuts away the fleshly sinfulness and leaves the spiritualness of things. Now, I don't mean that to be like too kingdom like, but it does it divides falsehood from truth. It divides sin from saint. I mean, and so it anyways.
Yeah,
That's
so I know we're running low on time, but those were the two big point takeaways from Paul Washer's
yeah.
message, and he ended on a
He's the
great
one that affected me the most last time I was up there. Sermon
yes,
affected me the most.
I would say him and James White as far as just filling my heart up with love for God and uh, just a wonderful experience. Probably those two. Um, I really got a lot intellectually out of James Coates' Roman 9 analysis, and then I wish I had sat through Vodi Bakum's beginning to end, but he was well received by the crowd, very well received.
Excellent, excellent.
Excellent. Yeah. I've already mentioned the vendors. I didn't really have anything new other than the Reformed Sage
Yeah,
and meeting Sam Waldron. That was really cool. Sam Waldron was a genuine guy. He was a delight to talk to.
he's got one of them old man kind of deep, raspy voices.
Oh, Kentucky, man, Kentucky. Yeah. Trying to think of what else we had a still had some still had a few issues as far as again the 8,000 people is too much for this Coliseum to
Mm,
hold. Uh, they even had some water issues. Some of the sinks, right, the water pressure was gone. Just drip, drip, drip. Yeah. Again, not completely G3's fault. Just I don't think the GICC can hold 8,000 people without having issues like
yeah,
that.
which surprised me because I expected them to the 2 years before that they used the place where they had the World Fair,
Right.
and I just assumed it was even bigger. They would have used it again, but um, maybe who knows what it is? Maybe it's cost, maybe it's parking, maybe because it is a pain to park at the other place.
Yeah.
Because it's this massive what do you call it? Um, where you parking layers.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about, but
Bunch of country boys. We can't even think of something like
yeah.
that. But
I've no I elevated parking. We'll just leave it
yeah,
at that.
I mean, it's a
Not
parking
yeah.
garage. I mean, to where it's broke up into different places, and if you're part of this
Yeah.
conference, you can't park in certain places, and so it's But that being said, um, I'm glad and genuinely glad that the Lord's using it to bless you, and that you're able to pick up on some stuff. And I'll end similar to what I did last time, man. If you ever get a chance, go. And I know. Listen, I'm a passionate guy. When it comes to the things of the Lord, I'm a passionate guy. And so when you heard me earlier, kind of go, that's a straw man argument. It's that kind of a thing. It's because most of these guys are smart enough to really bring the heat when it comes to these arguments, and and I get weary of the straw man arguments. That being said, you've got a guy preaching to a crowd that he's assuming is already Calvinist. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, um, James Coates, I've heard him preach. If I ever got in a meeting, I'd shake his hand. I'd try to, if he wanted to be friends, I'd be friends with him. I mean, I don't want anybody to think because of my passionate type reaction that I'm over here going, I hate these guys. They all suck. because that's not the case. I love them. I love them. Um, uh, maybe not what's his face, but the rest of them I love, and so I just said what's your face to have somebody go, who's he talking about?
Oh, yeah. In my head, I was thinking, should I say a name or? But no, that's totally cool,
Yeah.
man. I look. This is stuff. Some of this stuff is obviously you disagree
Mm-hmm.
with. A lot of it, obviously, I do agree
Mm-hmm.
with. But it's that
Yeah.
interact. I mean, if we
Let's
both agreed on everything, this would be a pretty boring podcast,
yeah,
right?
yeah, and there, I mean,
Yeah. So this is
there's
great.
things like what's his face, um, the blonde guy, um, he's the one AD's been going after recently.
Owen
Owen
Strand.
Strand, I,
I don't think he's blonde.
is in
He's
blonde.
like brown brunette, I think. Oh, I if I had to say I was disappointed by anything, it would be and it's not him. This is just what popped in my head when you said his when you started talking about him. They had a panel discussion of why did a lot of people Lawson, White, Bacham, Strand, like I think every preacher except for Ken Ham. Yeah, I think every preacher except Ken Ham was on the panel. There was quite a few, but it was not a very good panel.
Oh,
I didn't get a lot out of it.
hmm.
There were so many people on the
Too many talking
panel.
heads.
Well, I mean it weren't just that. There were so many people on the panel that they only were able to get like 3 or 4 questions
Yeah,
off before it was time to end the session. Now maybe they were already behind when they started. I weren't really paying attention to the time, but they only got a few questions going before it felt like it was time to end it. And I think part of that is you've got so many people up there that you're trying to make sure everybody's had their say, had their time to speak. Um, Virgil, he was the moderator. He decided which questions to ask and
can I
so
say
on.
something real
Um,
honest? I've
yeah, go
never
ahead.
been a big fan of Virgil. I'm not. Not.
This is interesting, but I this is just my
Yeah,
opinion. I think he was not the best person to lead the
yeah.
discussion, to do the questions, because he's slower paced,
Mm.
right? You need someone who knows. Phil Johnson in the past has done a great job of moderating
Yes, Phil does
questions.
it.
Josh Boyce probably would have been pretty good. Um, the ability to get the questions out quickly,
Mm-hmm.
ask for concise answers, or even phrase the question in a way that it can be answered
Oh,
concisely. See, that's key. That's key too.
let me go back to the Owen Strand thing. The
Yeah,
Owen
yeah, yeah.
Strand. There was another guy on the panel, the first panel. I don't remember his name to save my life.
I did not watch the
He
first
had
panel.
real pointy ears. That's something I noticed about it. Like they showed a side profile, and I was like, he looks like a elf. That's
I
how
have
he
no idea who it
look.
is.
I'm
Yeah,
not picking.
I I'm not gonna show my handsome ears off. I'm sorry.
I'm just saying, and but they have differing views on the Trinity than what we do.
So I'm John Harris just published a video on the Trinity, and I see Owen Strand's name on it. I haven't watched it yet, but I do. I need to go. I want
Yeah,
to go watch it. It's
and
on my
it's just
list.
simply the eternal submission. So it doesn't hold Christ in the same places as God the Father. It doesn't see them as equals across the
Right.
Holy Spirit, and he did bring up a good comment about that, talking about it was used to basically bolster um, not patriarchy, but
Complementarianism,
yeah.
or
And
okay.
so I just
So John Harris
yeah,
did,
John
or
Harris, yeah. And
Okay.
so I didn't know about the other guy. I didn't know Owen Strand um, was a subordinate. And so anyway, all that
Hmm.
being said, um, I know for a fact that some of those guys would adamantly disagree with that. The reason I bring that up is not to be like Owen Strand sucks. But to legitimately put it, even on that stage, there are men out there who disagree fundamentally on important doctrines. And so it's
Oh yeah, it does. Like we hadn't even touched eschatology yet, but there's a there was all three main views of eschatology were represented on the panel today. Um,
who represents
I,
Post.
James White would represent Post. I don't know if anybody else
I
there would
don't
have, but
know. James White
Vody
just
Bacham
wanted to be
represent.
with Durbin. That's all that's about. I'm
So
big,
that's another discussion. I would disagree with
of,
that, but
you know I don't.
Vody
It's
Bacham,
just it's just you're taking it too serious. It's just I'm playing I'm being the guy who's just being hard to get along with on that one because that's what people
okay.
say. That I've heard people say that, and I'm like, James White honestly just was like, oh
Oh, you were saying it sarcastically.
yeah.
Oh, I got you. I got you. Oh, 10-4.
Um,
No, so there was all three. Vody Bacham, he's a
right.
non-meal. I'm not sure
Optimistic
if
on
he's the
him.
pessimistic or the
He's
optimist.
optimistic.
Okay, I weren't sure, but I've always enjoyed his approach to missions and the Great Commission as being an optimistic view of things. I've always enjoyed that.
The man made him a college or a university in Zambia.
Yeah,
He's not hiding,
yeah.
So
I mean,
yeah. I like
we've hit 37 minutes,
there's
David.
fundamental differences. So I don't want anybody to walk away with places where you disagree or I disagree or we disagree with each other as if it's, well, I don't know if I can listen to, I don't know if I can listen to Vody anymore. Him being all meal, I can only listen to pre-meal, or I don't know if I can listen to Owen Strand because he disagrees on this issue with me, or I can't listen to ManAlive because they're hairy, and and
Or they don't agree with each
yeah,
other.
we're not perfectly aligned in every
No,
single.
no. Look.
But
It's something that we don't know how to do in America anymore. Is how to disagree with
yeah,
one another, how to disagree without hating one another. Right. Um, you start at Roman at 1 Corinthians chapter 13, right? Love bears all
mm-hmm.
things. Right. If you really love your fellow members of a church, your family, the body of Christ, if you really love someone, you'll put up with some differences. You'll even explore each
And
other's
there again,
differences,
the
right?
scripture says
You'll ask
they'll
questions
know we're of Christ how
by our
for
love.
one another.
That's right.
So love one another, be discerning, but love one another, and don't 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 agree with people just because you like who they are. Look into the Word and come up with and figure it out. Study the Word of God.
That's right.
So
That's
that's
right.
all I was trying to point out there at the last. Um, hopefully we'll be able to do this.
So I think tomorrow is the
Tomorrow's
last
a half
day. It's a half day. We're gonna take it pretty easy tomorrow
Okay.
afternoon. Somewhere along the way, should be able to get the podcast.
Okay.
Might even see if my pastor would like to give his closing thoughts on the conference, what he learned, what he gained, what he would, anything he would hope to see different next
Yeah.
time. Yeah, I think we'll have a good conversation.
All right, brother. Well, until next time, we out.
Thanks for watching. Later.